Listen closely. Do you hear it? That sound like moths dying against stained glass windows? That's the noise love makes when it believes its own propaganda. There's an old Romanian folktale about a woman who loved a man so deeply, she carved his name into her bones. Every letter, etched with a silver knife blessed by priests who'd forgotten how to pray. When he left her for someone younger, someone whose bones were still unmarked, she didn't weep. She laughed, because she finally understood the joke. Love isn't blind. It's a mortician, dressing corpses in wedding gowns and calling them brides. You see, Schopenhauer knew something most men refuse to admit while they're still breathing. The pursuit itself is the disease, not the woman, not the rejection. The pursuit, that fevered, pathetic scramble towards something that was never meant to be caught, like chasing your own shadow at sunset, convinced that if you run fast enough, you'll finally step on its throat. Recent psychology studies from 2024 whisper what ancient philosophers screamed. Men who define themselves through romantic conquest show cortisol levels comparable to soldiers in active combat zones. Their bodies are literally at war. With what? With the terrible suspicion that they might actually get what they're chasing. Picture this. A man sits in a velvet chair that smells of tobacco and regret. The candle on his desk has burned down to a puddle of wax that looks like spilled promises. He's writing a love letter to a woman who hasn't thought of him in 3 years. Each word is perfect. Each sentence, a small masterpiece of longing. But here's the secret he'll never admit. He doesn't want her to read it. He wants to want her. The wanting has become his religion. And religions need their gods to stay distant, untouchable, cruel. Kierkegaard called it the aesthetic stage of existence. That perpetual foreplay with life where everything is possibility and nothing is real. Men trapped here become connoisseurs of their own suffering, sommeliers of rejection, collecting heartbreaks like vintage wines they'll never drink. But here's where it gets interesting, where the darkness shows its teeth. The moment a man stops chasing is the moment he discovers something horrifying. Silence. Not peaceful silence. Not meditative silence. The kind of silence that makes you realize you've been using the noise of pursuit to drown out the sound of your own emptiness. There's a certain species of spider that dies the moment it stops moving. Scientists discovered this in 2023. If it pauses for more than 17 seconds, its heart simply forgets to beat. Men who've built their identity on the chase are like these spiders. They've trained their hearts to need the motion, the drama, the beautiful futility of reaching for what runs away. So they build cathedrals, not of stone, but of stories. The one who got away. If only she'd understood. We were perfect, but the timing. Each story is a stained glass window, filtering reality through colors that never existed. And they worship there, in these cathedrals of dead promises, genuflecting before altars built from screenshots of conversations that meant nothing to anyone but them. The truly dark part? The part that would make Nietzsche cackle in his madness? These men know. Somewhere, beneath the performance, beneath the wounded poet routine, they know they're addicted to the wound, not the woman. They know that getting what they want would force them to face what they are. Ordinary mortals who confused hormones for holiness, who mistook anxiety for passion, who built entire philosophies on the foundation of someone else's disinterest. Tell me, and be honest, because the dark sees through pleasant lies. When was the last time you wanted something more than you wanted to want it? When did the chase become more real than the prize? When did you start suspecting that you're not the hunter, but a moth, circling a flame that was never even lit? The cathedral doors are always open, but nobody ever leaves. Not because they can't, because outside there's only the terrible possibility that love might actually be simple, quiet, and kind. And what would they do with all their beautiful suffering then? She doesn't want you. She wants the power your need gives her. There's a Japanese legend about a mirror that shows not your face, but your need. Merchants who looked into it saw gold coins floating where their eyes should be. Warriors saw blood. And lovers? Lovers saw nothing at all. Just an endless hole shaped like someone else's approval. Here's a joke that isn't funny. A man spends 17 years becoming everything a woman says she wants. He learns to cook her favorite meals, memorizes poetry she'll never ask him to recite, builds his entire personality like a resume for a job that was never available. One day, she leaves him for someone who can't even spell her middle name correctly. The punchline? He's relieved, because now he can stop pretending to like jazz. You want to know what Machiavelli understood that modern men refuse to see? Women's attraction isn't a reward for good behavior. It's not a pension plan for emotional labor. It's a wild animal that appears when it wants and devours what it chooses. And the moment you try to domesticate it with dinner dates and good morning texts, it's already gone, leaving only its shadow for you to feed and call by her name. The year is now, this very moment, this humid night where somewhere a man is Googling how to get her back at 3 a.m., his laptop screen reflecting off eyes that haven't truly seen anything in months. Modern research from 2025 shows something delicious in its cruelty. Men who constantly seek validation from romantic partners show the same neurological patterns as gambling addicts pulling slot machine levers. Every text becomes a spin. Every smile, a potential jackpot. Every silence, proof the house always wins. But listen, lean in closer until you can smell the cordite and crushed roses. Here's the truly grotesque part. Women know. Of course they know. How could they not smell the desperation leaking from your pores like fever sweat? They know you're performing, and worse, they know you know they know. It becomes a danse macabre where everyone pretends the music is still playing even though the orchestra died 3 acts ago. Imagine a man wearing a velvet noose, convinced it's a necktie. He adjusts it in every mirror, tightens it when he feels loose, shows it off at parties. Look, he says, look how well it matches her eyes. Meanwhile, she's already 3 relationships past him, and he's still standing in the same spot, slowly strangling himself with fabric that feels too expensive to throw away. Nietzsche wrote about the last man, that pathetic creature who'd traded his soul for comfort. But he missed something. There's something worse than the last man. It's the almost man. The one who's always almost good enough, almost worthy, almost loved. He lives in the gap between who he is and who he thinks she needs him to be. And that gap becomes his home, furnished with screenshots and songs that were totally about us. The velvet noose has such beautiful patterns. Sometimes it looks like the way she laughed at your jokes that weren't funny. Sometimes it resembles the 3 weeks she seemed interested before her ex texted. Sometimes it's just the pattern of your own breathing, getting shallower, more performative, less real. Here's what happened to a philosopher in Vienna, 1897. He fell in love with a woman who collected men like beetles, pinning them to corkboards in her salon. Each Tuesday, they'd gather these specimens and compete for her attention with increasingly desperate displays of intellect and wit. One night, our philosopher realized something that made him laugh so hard, the other beetles thought he'd gone mad. He saw that she wasn't even watching. She was looking past them all, at her own reflection in the window, in love with the power of making grown men perform. And here's the liberation hiding in this horror. The strange gift wrapped in thorns. The moment you stop needing her validation, is the moment you become terrifying to her. Not attractive, terrifying. Because a man who doesn't need approval is a man who can't be controlled. And control, that velvet noose she holds, is the only thing that makes her feel real. So I ask you, in this dark hour when truth tastes like copper and wine, what would happen if you stopped? Not stopped loving, not stopped caring, but stopped auditioning for a role in someone else's drama. What would you discover in that terrible freedom? Who would you become if you finally admitted the velvet noose was never hers to hold? You've been tightening it yourself all along, mistaking suffocation for embrace? Some men cut the noose. They walk away bleeding but breathing. Others add more velvet, more layers, until they can't remember what their own neck feels like without the weight. They call this love. The dark calls it something else entirely. You're not chasing beauty. You're mortgaging your life to rent it. Shh. Do you hear that? That's the sound of 1,000 men scrolling through Instagram at 2:47. Each double tap a small death. Each perfect face a tiny funeral for their peace. Once, in a Persian nightmare that became a poem, a sultan collected the most beautiful women in his empire. He built them a garden made entirely of mirrors and diamonds, where every surface reflected perfection back unto itself, multiplied into infinity. Within a year, all the women had gone mad, not from vanity, from the terrible discovery that beauty, reflected endlessly, becomes monstrous. The Sultan found them scratching at their own faces, trying to find the flesh beneath the shine. But we don't talk about what happened to the Sultan, do we? How he spent his remaining years in that empty garden, conversing with reflections of women who were never there, slowly forgetting which memories were real and which were just light, bouncing off diamonds that had started to rot from the inside, turning black as beetle shells. Here's what's hilarious and hideous. Men in 2024, sophisticated men, educated men, men who've read Marcus Aurelius and quote Stoic philosophy, still organize their entire existence around a beauty that will betray everyone who believes in it. They chase the 8, the 9, the 10, as if these numbers mean something beyond the mathematics of their own emptiness. As if beauty could fill the hole that beauty itself carved out. Schopenhauer, that blessed pessimist who understood suffering like a sommelier understands wine, knew the secret. Beauty is nature's cruelest joke. It makes you want what wanting destroys. It promises transcendence but delivers only hunger. A hunger that feeds on itself, Ouroboros-like, until you're gnawing on your own tail and calling it a feast. Consider this delicious piece of modern research. Psychologists in Copenhagen discovered that men who exclusively pursue conventionally attractive women show decreased activity in the brain regions associated with authentic emotional connection. Their brains literally forget how to love while they're busy worshiping. They become priests in a religion where the goddess ages out of divinity every 7 years. I knew a man once, let's call him everybody, who only dated models, fashion models, Instagram models, hand models. It didn't matter as long as they modeled something. He had a theory that beautiful women were easier to love because they required less imagination. What he discovered, after his 5th relationship ended the same way, she got bored, he got desperate, nobody got happy, was that he wasn't loving them at all. He was loving his own reflection in their attention. When beautiful women looked at him, he felt beautiful too. When they stopped looking, he disappeared. But here's where it gets really dark, where even the shadows have shadows. The truly beautiful ones know their beauty is a countdown timer. They can hear it ticking in every compliment, feel it winding down with every birthday. So they weaponize it while they can, extracting maximum value before the market crashes. And men, Men mortgage their entire futures for a few months of rental property in paradise, not realizing paradise is just another word for a place you're not allowed to stay. There's an almost unbearable tenderness in watching a man realize that the beautiful woman he's been chasing is just as empty as he is. That she posts those photos not from confidence but from terror. That she needs his validation more than he needs hers, but neither of them has anything real to give. They're two human-shaped holes trying to fill each other with absence. In Tokyo, there's a bar where men pay $500 an hour to sit with beautiful women who are contractually obligated to laugh at their jokes. The men know the laughs aren't real. The women know the men know. Everyone knows everyone knows. But they all keep coming back, because the performance of intimacy is less frightening than actual intimacy. And beauty makes the performance feel almost true. The garden of rotting diamonds isn't a place. It's a state of mind. It's every dating app where faces are currency and personality is a discount nobody wants. It's every man who's ever said she's out of my league, while secretly believing he deserves a trophy for his suffering. It's every beautiful woman who's learned to weaponize male desire while dying of the very loneliness her beauty was supposed to cure. Here's my question for you, whispered through the dark like a secret that ruins everything it touches. When you close your eyes and imagine love, real love, the kind that survives morning breath and stomach flu and the slow disaster of aging, what face do you see? Is it beautiful? Or is it just there? Human? Flawed? Accessible? Terrifying in its ordinariness? Can you even imagine loving someone who doesn't make other men jealous? Or have you been in the garden so long that you've forgotten roses can grow in regular dirt? Some men leave the garden. They find women with crooked smiles and loud laughs and hands that have actually built things. These men report a strange phenomenon. Food tastes better. Colors seem more varied. Sleep comes easier. It's as if they've been wearing sunglasses at night their whole lives and finally took them off. The rest? They're still in the garden, taking selfies with their suffering, hashtagging their loneliness, swiping right on diamonds that were always just coal under pressure, rotting from the inside out, beautiful and worthless and infinite in their multiplication of nothing at all. You're not competing with her ex. You're fighting every ghost that ever touched her. There's a crumbling manuscript in Prague, written by a monk who went mad trying to catalog infinity. On page 347, between a recipe for melancholy and a map to nowhere, he wrote, "Woman is not singular, but legion. She carries her graves with her, each past self a ghost that votes on the present." The monk was wrong about infinity, but he was right about women. Picture this. You meet her on a Tuesday that smells like rain and possibility. She laughs at something you didn't mean to be funny, and for 17 seconds, you believe in God again. But what you don't see, what you can't see, are the 17 other versions of her standing right behind her, each one shaped by some other man's hands, some other life's failures, some other Tuesday's disasters. There's the her from age 19, who believed love meant sacrifice until she had nothing left to burn. There's the her from 23, who learned to weaponize indifference after someone she trusted sold her secrets for small talk. There's the her from last year, who still flinches when anyone moves too fast, speaks too loud, loves too hard. Modern neuroscience from 2024 discovered something that ancient witches always knew. Trauma doesn't just live in memory, it lives in the body. Every rejection, every betrayal, every time she was too much or not enough, it's all there, encoded in her nervous system like a security system you'll never get the password to. Kierkegaard wrote about repetition, how we're doomed to repeat not what we don't remember, but what we can't forget. Women are museums of things they can't forget. And you, poor fool, you walk into this museum thinking you're special, thinking you're different, not realizing you look exactly like the security guard who let the thieves in 17 years ago. Here's something that will make you laugh until you cry, or cry until you laugh. I've forgotten which comes first. Every woman you've ever loved was performing a play written by someone who hurt her. Every time she pulled away, she was pulling away from someone else. Every wall you couldn't climb was built by hands that weren't yours. You've been fighting ghosts, and the ghosts have been winning because they know her combination, while you're still trying to figure out if she likes roses or tulips. In Stockholm, psychologists studied what they called romantic palimpsests, relationships written over other relationships, never quite erasing what came before. They found that women carry an average of 7 defining romantic traumas that unconsciously shape every future interaction. 7 ghosts, 7 vetoes, 7 reasons why your good intentions are just noise in a frequency she's learned to tune out. But here's the truly grotesque part. The part that would make Schopenhauer order another drink. She doesn't want to be this way. She watches herself destroy good things, push away safe people, choose chaos over comfort, and she hates herself for it. But the museum is older than her conscious mind. The exhibits were installed before she learned to speak, and now they speak for her. I once knew a woman. We all knew her. She's every woman who's ever said, "I'm fine," while drowning, who kept a journal of all the ways men had disappointed her, not to remember, but to predict. She'd match new men against old patterns like a detective solving crimes that hadn't happened yet. The journal was 300 pages long. The last entry just said, "They're all the same person wearing different faces." She was right. She was also wrong. But being right and wrong simultaneously is what trauma does best. The museum has rooms you'll never see. The room where she learned to fake orgasms because real pleasure made her vulnerable. The room where she keeps all the apologies she never received. The room full of mirrors that show her how she looked to men who only saw parts of her. Nice ass, pretty smile, good listener, never the whole. And you? You walk through this museum with your muddy boots and good intentions, pointing at exhibits like you understand them, like your love could somehow renovate the whole space. But love isn't renovation. Sometimes it's just another exhibit she'll add after you're gone. The one who tried too hard, right between the one who didn't try at all and the one who reminded me of my father. So here's what I need you to understand. Here in this darkness where truth has nowhere to hide. When she says you remind her of someone, she's not lying, but she's also not telling the truth. You remind her of everyone. Every man who ever was or wasn't enough. You're not competing with her ex. You're competing with the entire history of male disappointment, compressed into a diamond of distrust she wears like armor. Can you love someone who sees you through a kaleidoscope of former failures? Can you be patient with a museum that adds a new exhibit every time you fuck up? Or will you become just another ghost, voting on someone else's present from your position in her past? Some men learn to love the whole museum, ghosts and all, and they understand that loving a woman means loving every woman she's ever been, even the ones that were shaped by other men's hands. These men report a strange phenomenon. The ghosts get quieter over time. Not silent, never silent, but quieter. The rest? They're still trying to burn down museums with matches made of promises, not understanding that some buildings are fireproof because they've already survived every kind of burning. You don't need her. You just fear meeting yourself without her. In the mountains of Tibet, there's a monastery where monks take a vow of silence that lasts exactly 21 years. Not because enlightenment takes that long, but because that's how long it takes to forget the sound of your own lies. I'm going to tell you something now that will feel like swallowing glass. Every man who has ever destroyed himself for a woman's attention was actually destroying himself to avoid a conversation with himself. The woman was just an excuse, a beautiful distraction from the terrible dialogue he couldn't bear to have in the silence of his own company. Here it is, the final blasphemy, the last heresy in the cathedral of romantic suffering. Men don't actually need women, not in the way they've been taught to believe, not in that desperate, crawling, I'll die without you way that poets make sound noble but is really just cowardice dressed in velvet. Nietzsche knew it when he wrote about the Übermensch, not a superman, but a man who had overcome the need to be completed by another. But Nietzsche went mad, didn't he? Spent his last years in an asylum, crying over a horse. Maybe that's what happens when you stare too long at the truth. You realize the horse was always more honest than the woman, and both were more honest than you. A study from Harvard in 2025, so fresh the ink hasn't dried, found that men who spent 6 months in complete romantic isolation showed increased testosterone, improved cognitive function, and most terrifyingly, reported higher life satisfaction than the control group who continued dating. The researchers were so disturbed by the findings, they ran the study 3 more times. Same results. Men thrived in the absence of what they thought they'd die without. But here's what's truly monstrous. What would make even the darkness blush? Women know this. They've always known. They can smell the self-sufficiency on a man like cologne, and it terrifies them more than violence, more than poverty, more than death. Because a man who doesn't need a woman is a man who might actually be capable of loving one. And real love, not the desperate grabbing, not the anxious texting, not the performative romance. Real love is so rare that most people would rather settle for the familiar theater of need. In ancient Sparta, boys were sent into the wilderness alone at age 7, not to become warriors. Any fool with a sharp stick can be a warrior. But to discover they could survive without their mother's comfort, without anyone's comfort. They came back different, not harder, quieter. They'd heard something in the silence that made them immune to certain kinds of manipulation. Modern men never get their wilderness. They go from mother to girlfriend to wife, passing between female validations like a joint at a party nobody really wants to attend. They never learn the atomic truth, that alone, in the dark, without a woman to perform for, or impress, or disappoint, they are already complete. The missing piece they've been searching for in every woman's eyes. It was never missing. They just convinced themselves it was because the search gave their life a plot, and men would rather have a bad story than no story at all. I'll tell you about a banker in London who discovered this by accident. His wife left him, took the kids, the house, even the dog he didn't like but pretended to love. He spent the first month drunk, the second month crying, the third month planning his suicide. But in the fourth month, something happened. He forgot to miss her. He'd wake up, make coffee, read the news, go to work, come home and realize he'd gone the entire day without thinking about her once. By month 6, he couldn't remember why he'd wanted to die. By year 1, he couldn't remember why he'd wanted to live with anyone at all. The monastery of masculine silence isn't a place. It's the space men create when they stop filling every quiet moment with the noise of female pursuit. It's the terrible freedom that comes when you realize you've been your own prisoner, and she was never the guard. Just another inmate who convinced you the cell was a castle. And now, here in this final darkness before dawn, I present you with the ultimate riddle, the last test, the question that separates the living from the walking dead. What if you stopped? Not for a day, not for a week, but for long enough to forget the sound of your own begging. What would you discover in that silence? Would you find God? Would you find nothing? Or would you find, and this is the most terrifying possibility of all, that you were always enough, always whole, always complete, and every woman you ever chased was just you running from the magnificent horror of your own sufficient company? Some men enter the monastery and never leave, not because they hate women, but because they've discovered something better than need: choice. They choose to be alone or choose to be with someone, but the choice comes from abundance, not starvation. They love from overflow, not deficit. Others? Others are still out there, in the rain, holding boom boxes over their heads, playing songs for women who aren't even home, who were never home, who were just projections on empty windows. They'll die like that, arms raised, music playing, never realizing the performance was only ever for themselves. The monastery doors are always open, but most men would rather freeze to death in the familiar cold than warm themselves by an unfamiliar fire. Because in the silence, in the true silence, you can hear the sound of your own lies dying. And that sound? It sounds exactly like freedom.